right, today we're welcoming Ben Bebenroth, founder of Spice Field Kitchen, a nonprofit that changes how people connect with food through revolutionary food engagement. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
So we're here today to talk about change. As you know, Muse is a change agency, and we're really interested in helping visionary clients create change in the world by supporting them with clear, powerful communications. And as a visionary in the food industry, you certainly qualify as a change agent. And so I'm excited to hear more about your perspective for why you decided to go down the road of changing how people connect with food. Let's talk about that. So, what change do you want to see in the world in relation to how people connect with food?
I think the change I want to see in the world around how people connect with food is accepting the fact that they are in control, for the most part, of how they feel and what their potential is. If people need some help with awareness around, these are the three stages of change, awareness, acceptance, and then action. And a lot of times I see people that are unaware of how much food impacts their body, their mind, their potential to give back and create in the world. And that bothers me. I have almost a disease around how much connectivity I see from food into the daily life of everyone. So I have this like molecular kind of vision of what a carrot in its perfect carrot environment is like, what a chicken in its perfect chicken environment is like. As Joel Salatin would say, the chickenness of the chicken, right? Chickens aren't made to live in a warehouse, right? They're made to live in the wild and roost in trees and eat snakes and rabbits and grass and all kinds of things. So I guess I have this hyper intense awareness of that, which has allowed me to accept it. And that's why I don't eat fast food. And that's why I'll grab a handful of almonds instead of a candy bar. Most people don't even connect that decision of candy bar, feel horrible an hour from now. It doesn't even correlate. So my steps of helping people down that journey to get to action, sometimes it's years. But I can't separate food from function.
So you mentioned awareness being an important component of starting to move people along the stages of change. Awareness is one of the most difficult and challenging areas to start to institute change. You're basically taking someone from unaware, I have no idea where food comes from, I just go to the store, I pick it up and eat it, to being interested in learning about where food comes from and how it has an impact on my body. So talk to us about some of the specific techniques you're using in relation to revolutionary food engagement to move people from unaware to interested.
Yeah. Moving people from unaware to interested is I wouldn't say the sweet spot of Spicefield Kitchen, but it's where we are, right? Whether it's sweet or not, it's where we are, and we have to accept that. So we work with mostly limited to moderate income families and students, and we are getting them from awareness to interested with enthusiasm. And that's where the radical or revolutionary food engagement is coming from. So revolutionary food engagement to us is taking someone outside of their current environment, be it in a classroom, be it in a school garden or on a field trip, and creating an experience that's unforgettable. So a lot of times when we're doing this, we're letting the kids handle the food first. They're harvesting kale leaves. They're saying, oh, I don't like mushrooms. Oh, you don't? Check out this log covered in shiitakes. And then pick a shiitake, a giant one, and like pass it around and have everybody check out the gills. And like now it's more of sensory overload of like the smell, the scent, or the sight, the feel of these things. It's not allowing someone to stay trapped in their aversions of the unknown, right? Most of the kids we work with only know what they know because of access and education. So from that perspective, we have to establish trust. We have to create a sense of belonging and then have a mutual experience with the whole group that makes change okay, right? And
Can I
that
just
has
can I just like ask you to follow up on that real quick? So it's not just about talking at someone about how good this mushroom is. It's about putting them into a multisensory experience where they can feel that, but that's not even the full story. You actually have to create an environment where they kind of think it's cool.
correct.
Right?
So never was this more obvious than during the beginning of the pandemic. First of all, we were separated as humans and we had to stay in our 6-foot compartments. Secondarily, there was this massive social justice issue with all of the George Floyd riots and all of this. So the majority of the students we work with are people of color. And now you've got 2 skinny white guys standing in front of a class on a farm. So I'm out of my comfortable environment. You don't look like my people, right? I automatically have a trust issue with, now you're trying to make me eat vegetables, which I don't like or eat or associate with. I'm generalizing, of course, but I'm just stating that in that scenario, establishing on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that baseline of trust, of belonging, of tribal belonging, right? Now we are all in this environment together. We are going to experience kale with honey thyme vinaigrette and crispy bacon, right? We're going to do that together. And then we're going to talk about what we think about it, as opposed to standing up there preaching to people, you need to eat more vegetables and you're going to do it today, right? First, it's, man, look at how cool this plant is. Look at this kale leaf. Is it bumpy or smooth, right? Flip it over. Man, look at that giant stem riding up the center of it. You could strip it like this. Listen to that sound. And like, right? Like we're experiencing things together, as opposed to being an authority of vegetables that is demanding somebody submit to the will of vegetable eating. We're experiencing all of the parts of that. And I think that's what Steve really does so well in the classroom and in the school gardens, of he's taking these kids along this journey of like, let's germinate a kale. Now we transplant the kale. Now let's put in the row of the kale. And then it's, let's water the kale. Let's row cover the kale. By the time those kids are eating kale, they've been engaged with that plant for 40 days in these different multitude of experiences and states of being. Inherently, there is this general curiosity and excitement around, oh my God, we finally get to try it, you know, because they're all in the same tribe now. They've been caring for this thing. They've been experiencing all these different levels of this thing. So that gets the enthusiasm up and overcomes the aversion, you know, to trying new things. And so now awareness kind of takes care of itself in that moment.
So just to clarify, Steve Baker is your curriculum director. And what you just described was his engagement inside school gardens, which is different than field trip engagement where they're coming out to the farm. So you've got these sort of 2 separate activities happening, but the common thread between the 2 is, number 1, enthusiasm, but like truly your ability to, number 1, understand your position in their minds and connect with them in really relevant ways. And I think this is a very important point for brands to understand, specifically brands who are engaged in content marketing for the purposes of education. You can't just stand up and talk at someone. you have to understand their mindset, and you have to understand where you fit into that mindset so that you can truly connect with them in meaningful ways. And it sounds like you and Steve are both very committed to doing that.
I mean, to be honest, it's a multi-prong approach to multi-prong engagement. We have so many different opportunities to work with people. There might be one-time field trips out here. There might be classes that we're in their classroom 10, 15 times a year, and then they have a field trip at the end of the year. I mean, just imagine the different levels of enthusiasm and trust in those two groups. So, Steve Baker, being the program director, is much more formulaic. He's a seasoned, 16-year veteran of education, licensed educator. He has his methods, right? I'm a chef, so I can kind of go at this a little bit more abstract. So I either use really two different paths: shock or association. So for shock, like if I'm in front of a group for the first time ever, or I'm giving a keynote or whatever I'm doing, if this is the first time I'm seeing this group of people and I have 40 minutes with them, I'm going to shock you because I need you to accept, right? I need to get to acceptance faster. I don't have time to do all of this awareness work around food and health, especially if I'm on a stage and there's 200 people out there. It's like, okay, I'm going to hit you with McDonald's, clogged arteries, and deforestation right out of the gate. And it'll get you very uncomfortable. I always say, like, if nobody walks out, I haven't pushed the envelope hard enough. And usually I've pushed the envelope hard enough. Then I can reel back from that stuff and start to connect. Okay, didn't that feel horrible in the beginning of this presentation when I was showing you obesity, diabetes, deforestation, suppressed labor force, all these things? Well, stop giving your money to those people, right? And then it's like, oh, okay. Oh, you've got my attention. Now I'm aware of the problem and I can push forward into, dude, grab a fistful of almonds, grab a salad, do something different, but stop promoting this. Now, on the other side of that, if I'm with a group that we have repeat engagement with, I can keep building those levels of awareness. But if those kids are coming out to the farm for the first time, Steve's been in their classroom cooking over a rocket burner for like a little camp stove for, a couple months. I'll pull the tractor over and start a charcoal fire in the bucket and have a grill grate over it right behind me. And the kids are just like, what? That is building that enthusiasm and that acceptance of like, oh man, now I'm excited to try whatever's coming off of that I've never seen before, So those are two kind of different layers to condensing that period of moving from awareness to enthusiasm or to acceptance. That, I mean, we have to use these tricks all the time.
So you work with kids, teenagers, and adults. This isn't just,
Correct.
Kids in school that you're working to change how they think about food. Of all of those, that spectrum of age groups, who is the most likely to be shaped and why?
Of all the demographics and age groups that we work with, the most likely and easiest to shape are the ones that are already in process of being shaped. So middle school kids are really awesome, like late and elementary kids. Now, that's not to say that the first grade and third grade STEM classes at Parma aren't absorbing an amazing amount of information and change from this, but it's easier to create enthusiasm in a younger aged class, especially when we have repeat engagement. I feel like after you cross that 9th grade threshold, it's very difficult unless that is a vocational group or a class that is specific to culinary or agriculture or urban planning and design. Very difficult to break through that this is me, the world is me kind of a thing. And that's just a factor of a person's journey, right? When you're in high school, it's all about you. So yeah, that first grade through third grade is a sweet spot for overcoming getting to the enthusiasm part really quickly. The sixth grade through eighth grade period is like, man, now I can have these kids doing stuff, right? Now we're cutting things, we're tearing stuff apart, they're sauteing a little bit. So I can attach their awareness and their acceptance to action a little bit more. Whereas, a class of first graders, you're not going to turn them loose on a table full of knives.
Certainly. Okay. So tell me about the ultimate journey. So you touch a kid in a sort of a group of kids in a classroom environment. Maybe they have some experiences with Spice Field Kitchen early on, third, fourth grade. They're coming out doing field trips. They've got a school garden through middle school. And then tell me about the ultimate vision for how these experiences and information can change them moving forward. What is the ultimate vision there?
So the ultimate vision for our, we don't like to say touching children. We like to say impressions.
Right, impressions, right. Right.
Our ultimate journey is longitudinal data, which we've been doing this now for 6 years, I believe. So the classes that we've had the longest periods of contact with is urban squash. And now the kids that we had as students in 7th grade are graduating this year. And urban squash follows their participants and their students into college. And then those college students come back and contribute to the program through education, coaching, all these things, and training, especially if they stay in the squash program. So those kids now have seen the salsa demo, the rice and beans demo, the kale salad demo, like the oatmeals, the cooking pancakes, all of these different layers of how you feed yourself. Their awareness and acceptance of dietary impact is coupled with their academic and athletic performance. So they have a coach following them to all these different cities for competitions, limiting the foods that they can choose. Right? We want soda. No, you're not having soda. We have a game in 2 hours. They still may want those things, but not only do they have Spice Field Kitchen telling them, here's the power of healthy eating and how transformative it can be in your lives. Now you have a coach connecting that to how you're about to perform in 2 hours or how you performed 2 hours ago. So now that is the data that we're kind of starting to extrapolate out of the program to prove its effect and its worthiness to our funders of, look at this group of kids, look at what they wouldn't eat before, look at what they will eat now. Outside of medical data like BMI, blood sugar, all these types of things, which is very difficult to get and monitor over an extended period of time through HIPAA and all these things, that's the strongest case that we can make for the impact of our education programming is these kids didn't like vegetables and now they do. When we have our fundraiser on the farm and the parents come out, that's the most frequent thing we hear. I don't know what you did, but Johnny loves Brussels sprouts now. It's like, oh, please, can you say that into my phone? Like, and what we did was we made Brussels sprouts fun for everyone. Most people hadn't seen Brussels sprouts growing on the stalk, right? Picking them off, taking the tiny ones that aren't good and throwing them at each other. Like break down the barriers to vegetables, make them fun. And now 2 years later, Johnny likes Brussels sprouts.
What are some of the major obstacles for your organization in realizing this change?
I mean, the biggest obstacles for us is definitely, the big three that we go up against all the time is access, education, and then equipment or the ability, right? So if you live in a food desert and you can't get produce very often, that's an issue. If you don't know what to do with it when you get home, that's an issue. If you don't have the appropriate tools right? We have a lot of kids we work with that live off of a hot plate. So they're warming up soup in a pot or ramen or toaster oven style, and we have to be conscious of that. It's actually something that we've evaluated heavily around our local foods platform. It was a tough conversation to have, but it was a reality of like, when you're dealing with a limited moderate income family and you're just trying to get them to put some kale or some broccoli into their ramen cup or their mac and cheese, we do these food hacks off of prepared foods because you have to accept the base. Okay, what can you get? Let's try to work a little bit of something healthy into that. I doubt those parents are like, hey, where'd that broccoli come from? Like, they don't care because they're not going to farmers markets very often. They're trying to keep up with daily life, dealing with the pressures of all kinds of urban living. We just need to accept the fact that if we can get you to be aware that vegetables are going to make you feel better, and fruits and whole grains, now I'll give you a couple of tools as far as like what to look for in the store. And then just encourage you, like cutting board, chef knife, saute pan. You can do a lot with that. Now we have this gap bridged, right? Now you can make scrambled eggs at home instead of grabbing a Pop-Tart and a Mountain Dew. That's victory.
So what you've said over the course of this discussion is that creating change is a very thoughtful, intentional process. It involves, number one, enthusiasm, but that's not enough. You can't just be a cheerleader for your cause and expect people to embrace it, right? You have to create trust and presenting information in a way that is associative with their community and creating a sense of belonging. You have to create a multi-sensory experiential moment that in some ways shocks people, in other ways, at least at the very least, entertains them. And this last component is super important because we see this all the time, and that is an ability to make the information realistic to the person in their lifestyle and their environment. And a lot of people miss the boat in that because they're so concerned with presenting the ideal circumstance and trying to get people to buy in with the ideal sense of change that they're not willing to adapt that change to really meet someone where they're at in order to create a series of quick wins, whether that's like putting some sauteed spinach in your ramen, and being okay with that. Because everyone has to start change somewhere. They can't just jump from 0 to 100 without some of those little steps in between. And it sounds like you all have a pretty good sense for what those steps might be.
Well, I mean, I think that's where we're missing the boat on the food as medicine wave right now, because a lot of dietitians, nutritionists, and, pediatricians, you name it, any type of physician is seeing a patient so infrequently, having them do blood work. They're already in a state of fear and apprehension. And then coming back into the room with a packet of papers like, dude, cholesterol off the charts, low in vitamin D, low, right? And then here's some recommended foods. Have a good year.
Right.
Well, what was that? Right.
Yeah.
Now I'm terrified and overwhelmed. I have no bridge to get there. Right. And P.S., that person is possibly so far down the road of unhealthy patterns that doesn't even, they're just in shock. So they immediately go out and seek sugar to feel better. Right.
Yeah.
That's not effective. And that was a big part of what we've been striving to change with the field kitchen is we have to get in front of these dietary related diseases in Cleveland and beyond before these kids are ending up in a physician's office with fatty liver disease at 14. It's like, well, no one was there for them from 6 to 14. 8 years of missed opportunities, 3 meals a day, thousands of meals could have been maybe not the most perfect healthy meal, but could have been attached to the fact that I'm owning my destiny a little bit. I'm putting broccoli into my ramen because I know I need it and because I know my body will perform better. That simple transition, it's just one ingredient and it's just one meal. but that can peel out. And when it accumulates over time, then it just becomes a statement of fact. I eat vegetables, right? As opposed to the statement of fact before, I don't eat green stuff, which, yes, we hear that all the time. I don't eat green stuff. And my counter to that is, man, you'd probably be better off if you only ate green stuff. Like, but that's a thing. That's a real thing. I did this demo at Scranton Road Ministries with Steve probably 3 or 4 years ago. It was before the pandemic. And we were setting up in the basketball court in the gymnasium, and we're getting all of our prep laid out. And these kids are playing basketball and hanging out. And this one kid comes over, he's a Puerto Rican kid, and he's like, "Oh man, what's that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's parsley." He's like, "Oh, I don't eat green stuff." I'm like, "You don't eat parsley, dude? Come on." And I start listing off all of these foods that are pretty common in the Puerto Rican community. I'm like, "Well, it's in this. You eat rice and beans?" "Yeah." "Well, there's green stuff in there, like there's green stuff in
Sure.
sofrito." So we did this demo. It was brown rice, roasted delicata squash, and then just this super simple salsa verde, right? Which we were in a heavily populated Latino environment. So it wasn't herb pesto. It was, right? Tie it in.
Right.
Salsa
Yeah.
verde. And they're like, "This isn't like salsa verde I've had." And it's like, well, there's a lot of different types of that from around the world. So long story short, we get this plate of brown rice, piece of squash over it. And this is a small tasting portion. Boom, green stuff right over the top of all of it. Kid flipped out, like couldn't handle how good it was. Mob scene around the table at the end of it. Moms are up there talking to us. We had some lemon thyme there, and one lady there was from Yemen, and like that was their culture. And she was like, "Oh my God, I love lemon thyme on my short ribs. How can I find this?" So we bridged this cultural gap with food. Now, had that kid just been allowed to walk past that table and been like, "Oh, I don't eat green stuff," to the, skinny white guy behind there in a chef coat, no transformation. But bridge that gap culturally, make it okay for everybody. And then it was even like, "Okay, everybody out there, I want to hear about what you don't like about this dish first. And then let's talk about what you do." Got a couple of pushbacks on, "Oh, I've never eaten the skin of squash before. That's kind of weird," right? And a little bit of that stuff. But it made it okay to complain right out of the gate. And then the compliments just started kind of piling on top of that, and it just washed away all that negativity. So "I don't eat green stuff" was now like a funny comment, that it was okay to have fun with that in that environment. And I mean, that was with Metro hospitals. That was with Metro Health Systems, and all of those families, those kids had pre-diabetic markers, and it was their parents, their kids, us doing this demo together in a local community church. And it was like, that's what it takes. You have to meet people where they are. And we've got to stop this avalanche of information of where you should be and first talk about where we are.
Okay. So my last question for you is that you have really, you've talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of students and people. You've had the ability to make an impression on many different audiences, one-on-one, small groups and large groups, and in an attempt to institute a change of mindset. My question is, what have you learned from them that has changed you?
Are you asking about what I've learned from them that has changed our approach to how we're trying to achieve this, or what I've learned from them that's changed me as a person?
Either one.
Well, I would say the first thing I've learned is to back off of the local food or nothing platform, because it's not relevant for that community and these communities that we work in. It's wonderful, but we're almost more putting an additional layer of emphasis on you can grow this yourself in your backyard. Start a container garden, start an herb garden, sending kids home with little pots of chives. Plant it wherever you live. It'll always be there, right? Oh, well, we live in an apartment. What if we move? Then it's there for someone else, right? Like, as opposed to saying farmers markets, farmers markets, farmers markets. That's an elevated price point. That's kind of a luxury of the affluent. And it's just not a reality for a lot of the populations we work with. So I've learned that it's not local broccoli over everything. It's broccoli, right? It's like, get a vegetable in there. The thing I've learned for myself from these students and the teachers as well is just the good we're doing is larger than the challenges we face. We're not going to fix Cleveland's diet. We're not going to fix the food system. We're just going to show some kids the power of healthy eating and give them some tools and some lessons to take on into their future. And hopefully that changes how they feed their kids. That's enough. It's enough if you only get to have 1,000 student impressions a year, which is about a third of what we have right now. But if you think about that, about 10% of the crowd actually takes what we do and starts to really integrate it into their lives. So if we have 3,000 impressions, that's 300 students that are going home cooking with their families. When we're doing our online Zoom demos, we've gone from having 5 to 10 families participate to like 75 families on Zoom making soft pretzels or rice and beans. That's amazing. In itself, that's amazing. It doesn't have to be attached to BMI and blood sugar and all that stuff. It doesn't need all of that. It just needs people to be aware of it. They've accepted it. Now they're cooking together. That's action. Boom, journey complete, right? Like that doesn't have to be that much bigger than that. Everybody's not going to graduate and be a health teacher or a chef.
Right. All right. Ben Bebenroth, founder of Spicefield Kitchen. Thank you for sharing your efforts on change today. It's an honor to support you and most certainly to also be married to you.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Love you, honey. Bye.
Love you.